Collect all my papers here. Oh, I did forget to mention we do have missions updates from the Shavers to Iceland, and then Mass Baptist College sent in a letter, and then the Drust, and then Jordan Smith. He is doing well. He's been busy with deputation and things, and trying to find resources for himself for sign language in, I guess, Albanian people. They have a different culture, obviously, and so there are different signs and symbols for ASL in Albania, and so he's trying to find some resources there. And it looks like somebody is working on some book, I guess, there to help him with that. So it's encouraging just to see the Lord providing in advance for that. I really appreciate you, brother, coming and praying this morning, or this evening, whatever this day this is. Okay. Is it Brother Higgins, or who is it? Is Brother Higgins? Okay. So if you got a chance to sign that and just let them know you're praying for them, we would appreciate that. Tonight, we do continue our lesson series on redeeming the realities of marriage. And your outline is quite extensive, and I do apologize for that. But there are a lot of the questions that I felt would be helpful for you to not only hear about tonight, but also to be able to keep with you if you have a place that maybe you store things that might be beneficial in the future. I'd encourage you to maybe put that someplace when we go through the series. This series is very taxing on me emotionally because it's a challenge to my own marriage, and it just takes a lot. It takes a lot out of me, and I'm grateful that you're here because I work hard. I really do. I work very diligently on these lessons and preparation of them, and so your being here says a couple things. Number one, I believe you love the Lord. And I believe you love God's people. And I believe that you want help from the scriptures. And that is encouragement to me. We have covered two daily principles or commitments that we ought to be making in our marriages already. We talked about giving ourselves to a regular lifestyle of confession and forgiveness. We talked about coming clean, that is confession, and then, of course, canceling debts, talking about forgiveness. And then just recently, we talked about how that we'll make a commitment to growth and change of our daily agendas by pulling weeds and planting seeds. And so we discussed that. Now, tonight, the lesson title is Protecting the Fine China of Marriage, and it's on risking and restoring trust. I've seen many marriages and have been in many homes that I would describe as a location in which two people lived rather than an investment that two people are making. They have the same address, but they don't live really together. They're there, but they don't really commit to one another. Unintentionally, couples, through neglect of their relationship, will often withdraw from one another. Subconsciously, they do not trust one another enough to place themselves into one another's hands. I'm awful when it comes to babies. I feel like if I hold them, I'll break them. So my wife can attest. I don't hold babies a lot. I just don't. I am so nerve-wracking, crazy about holding a precious little one. It's like fine china to me. It's like, don't move. I won't move. You won't move. Well, good. Why? Because they're precious, and I just feel they're so, breakable. But you think about trust inside of your marriage, and I wanted to compare it to fine china because just that, it's fine and breakable. And so you want to be very careful with it. Most of the time when someone has china, they usually probably don't pull it out frequently. They don't nuke their hot dogs in the microwave on china. They take it out during special occasions and they handle it very carefully. Well, marriage trust is just that. It is breakable. It is precious, and it's very, very delicate. Trust is eroded incrementally. A couple's trust is not generally destroyed in an explosion of unfaithfulness, but through the incessant drips of relational laziness and personal selfishness. So tonight, we're going to examine how to be able to protect the fine china of marriage. First, there is the call to trust and be trustworthy. What is this thing called trust that is so essential to any kind of a healthy relationship? It is this. Trust is being so convinced that you can rely on the integrity, strength, character, and faithfulness of another, that you are willing to place yourself into his or her care. The call to trust, first of all, it's in order to express solemnity. That is, the solemnness of your vows. The vows you repeated before God and those present were really a commitment to place yourself into the care of another person and to care for him or her in return. One of the essential foundational stones of marriage is trust. You've got to have that. You can have cohabitation without trust. You can have relational ease without trust. But you cannot have intimate, vulnerable, mutually cooperative, one-flesh union that marriage is intended to be without trust. It's impossible to have it. You've got to have trust to have that union. So it's in order to express the solemnity of your vows, but also in order to experience security. That is, your vulnerability. If you're going to have security in your marriage, you must have trust. There must be trust. In order to feel safe emotionally. Like you can, have a freedom to express yourself emotionally inside your marriage. Marital trust provides a place for you to share your feelings, where your feelings will be taken seriously. They could be all cattywampus, but your spouse goes, "Oh well, they matter to me." It's secure. You can emotionally be yourself, and also not only feeling safe emotionally, but being able to speak honestly. Being able to speak honestly. Marital trust allows you to both speak and listen honestly. Marital trust is about rest. It's about peace, security, and hope. It lets you know that you are mutually cared for and that your interests are important to your spouse. And that happens when you have trust. So there's a call to trust. But notice also, secondly, the character of trust. In our Bibles, we're going to look at Proverbs 25, verse number 19. Proverbs 25:19. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Now, Miss Jerry just had a root canal? Ugh. She just had a root canal, so that kind of rings a bell for her right there. Trust or confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Look also at Proverbs chapter 31. Notice also in verse number 10. Proverbs 31, verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. So confidence or trust is something that is earned or gained over time, can be diminished or hurt or obviously broken over time. And so trust is very important for a husband and a wife on both sides of this relationship. It's time really to look tonight in the mirror and discover whether or not trust is a character quality in our marriage. And so tonight, there are several questions, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going to probably run through these quickly because there are so many, but maybe something is what we're going through tonight might stick out to you. Like, oh, wow, That's us. Well, that's what we need to work on, or that's what I need to work on. And so let's look in the mirror tonight and let's see if we were to consider our marriage filled with that character quality of trust. First of all, is there more unity, understanding, and love in your marriage now than there ever has been before? You see, trust enables you to resolve difficulties. And hopefully, in the very beginning of one's marriage, there are difficulties and you go, I don't know what to do, and you're kind of stumped. But if you've earned trust, you've gained that trust, you're able over the years to progressively get better at resolving difficulties and therefore the elevation of trust in your marriage. Trust also enables you to respect differences. Through mutual resolution and respect, you end up building marital unity. You respect those differences. You trust one another with the differences, to not be, taken advantage of, manipulated, or, dismissed. Next question. Do you both do what you promise in the time that you have promised? You both do what you promise in the time that you promised it. Every promise is reflected on the barometer of trustworthiness. So obviously, on that barometer, if you keep your word in the time period of your word, your barometer of trust grows. Same is true if it will be diminished if you do not keep. Most of the time we think of major promises. No, it is the little times that we said we would do something and we didn't do it that breaks trust. It's the small things that over time diminishes that barometer of trust in our marriage. Every promise is received as a building block of trustworthiness. So if the promise is kept within the time period which you had promised it, that builds trust in your marriage. Next question, letter C. Are you attentive to what your spouse sees as important? Are you attentive to what your spouse sees as important? Selfishness is self-focused, but service is spousal-focused. You're concerned about what is important to them, and that builds trust. When you say what you think, what you feel, what you value is important to me, that builds trust. Most of the time, we struggle with selfishness, what I want, when I want it, how I want it. But when we're service-oriented, and what can we do to encourage and serve our spouse, then it builds trust. Love is about opening yourself to your spouse and their interests. It's about committing yourself to what he or she cares about. It's acknowledging, anticipating, and meeting your spouse's needs. Going in advance. Why? Because you've learned what interests them. What turns their crank. You understand that. Next question. Do you make excuses for failures to do what you have promised, or are you ready to confess? You see, self-excusing is toxic to trust. Well, I didn't have time, or it just didn't work out. No. We can't make excuses. It's toxic to any kind of amount of trust. Self-abasement is tantamount to trust. Just, I'm sorry. I blew that. I really meant to do that. Or, I'm sorry about that. I want to keep my word. I'm not going to make excuses. It just didn't cross my mind. Whatever the case may be. But self-abasement, just humbling yourself and saying, you're right, is tantamount to having trust. Next question, letter E. Do you listen well to your spouse and act on what you've heard? Listening well and acting on what you've heard. A failure to listen results in a spouse's reluctance to talk. I'm bad at this. So sometimes my wife will be saying something to me, and I just have to downright say, can you repeat everything you just said? And I'll be honest with you, I do this to you as church family, and I don't like it. I am a one-track mind. And I could be thinking one thing, I'm solving a crisis in my mind, and I walk right by you. And you say, Hi, Pastor. And I'm like, what? Huh? I was talking to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, so sometimes that happens even in our marriage too, where we hear, but we're really not listening. We're really not engaged. And so if that happens, though, what the spouse will do is say, well, I'm done talking. You're not listening. I'm done talking. A failure to listen results in a spouse's refusal then to trust. If what I'm saying, if what she's saying is not important enough to listen to, I won't talk, and therefore I've learned not to trust. And so it's very important that we listen with attentiveness to our spouse and act on what we've heard. Let us not be guilty of hearing but not listening. Next question, letter F. Do you follow through with mutually agreed upon plans? Following through with mutually agreed upon plans. Planning together promotes unity. You're making two into one. There's unity when you make plans together. Let's do this, let's do that. Planning together protects intimacy. Let me just say, unless the world has come to a crashing end, if you gave your word about an activity that you're going to do with your spouse, you better keep it. You better keep it. Now, most of the time, a spouse will be very cordial and they'll say, I understand. But if you have a consistent pattern of doing that, you are diminishing the ability of your spouse to trust you. Keep your word. Make plans together and keep those plans. Letter G. Do you share with your spouse your thoughts, desires, hopes, dreams, and concerns, or is it easier for you to be quiet or to share with someone else? Understand, number one, dismissed thoughts and feelings hurt trust. Dismissed thoughts and feelings hurt trust. Ouch. The Lord just kind of nailed me on that one. Okay, going on. Divulging thoughts and feelings to others hinders trust. Divulging thoughts and feelings to others hinders trust. Your spouse ought to be the one to know your feelings and your thoughts. And divulging your own to someone else is not your spouse, or divulging theirs to someone else is not a good thing. It diminishes trust. And so be very careful with divulging thoughts and feelings with others, because it will diminish and hinder trust. Letter H. Is there any evidence that you have withdrawn from the other in protective distance? There's two things. There's a fear of candor, which is being honest with somebody, being honest with your spouse, your fear of that, and fear of confrontation. Those two. So to protect yourself, you withdraw because it's too difficult and time-consuming and emotionally draining to be honest with your spouse about something and possibly having to confront them. It diminishes trust. Letter I. Do you carry wrongs with you, or do you trust one another to confront and confess? Silence can be a sign of bitterness. And silence is a sign of trust that's been broken. Again, we go back to the idea of if what I'm saying doesn't matter, or it's not taken seriously or honestly, then it diminishes trust. And here you'd find that the end result of that really could be bitterness, and so your spouse is silent, or certainly is an indication that trust has been broken if they're no longer willing to confront you about things, or sense that you're going to confess or willing to confess. Letter J. Do you ever wonder what the other is doing when not with you? If that's the case, listen, number one, hidden sin steals the possibility of rest. Your spouse can't rest, and you certainly can't if you're hiding sin. Neither one of you can, because you're guilty, and he or she is wondering what you're up to. They don't know. They can't trust you. Honest self-disclosure promotes intimate rest. Both of your hearts can rest when you're completely transparent about your lives. And they don't have to wonder what you're doing when you are not around them. And so there is a character deficiency of trust if you're wondering what the other's doing when you're not with them. Letter K. Are you conscious of editing your words and withholding your feelings because you can't trust your spouse to deal with them properly? I can't talk to her. I can't talk to him because they won't handle what I say appropriately. They'll use it against me. They'll laugh. They will mock. You see, number one, expressed thoughts and feelings convey loving trust. If you're able to express your thoughts, if you're able to express your feelings, there is a certain amount, it may not be great, but still a certain amount of loving trust. It's there. It's there. You have enough confidence in your spouse to trust them with your thoughts and feelings. Also, repressed thoughts and feelings convey loss of trust. To repress them, to not expose them, to not convey them to your spouse, it is a sign of a loss of trust. I'm not able to trust them. When you're not sure that you can place the fine china of your life in your spouse's hands, it's an indication of a loss of trust in your marriage. Letter L. Is your marriage partner the best friend in your life, or has your dream of this kind of companionship evaporated? Most people, I guess, should be able to say of their spouse, I married my best friend. Married my best friend. And because of that, they dream of a life that is lived in unity together with one another. But if there is a loss of trust in that relationship, that dream evaporates. It's no longer there. It all has to do with trust. Letter M. Is your sexual relationship mutually satisfying, or is it hard for you to give yourself physically to your spouse? I'll just leave it there. Letter M. Do you say things to other people about your spouse that you have not communicated to him or her? Well, let's think about this. For example, gossip at social functions. One of the things that gets most all of us in trouble is our tongue. Everybody struggles with their speech, what they say. We've all maybe been in that kind of position where everybody in that area there, you get caught up in the moment of they're saying this and you're saying that, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you start saying things, you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. What happened? You got caught up in that moment where you said something that you have not communicated to your spouse, but maybe you're frazzled about it and you're with a bunch of other guys. Oh, that's the second one. Gym talk about spouse failures. That's the second one. I don't know if I put that in there. So gossip at social functions or gym talk about spouse failures. Guys get together and they're in the gym. They're all working out. Yeah, well, my woman did this, Not smart. You go, ladies at a social function, you're talking about your husbands. No, don't do that. If you didn't talk to your husband about it, you ought never, ever bring it up with any other woman. If you've not talked to your wife about it, you ought never to bring it up to any other man. You're eliminating or discouraging or hindering trust. I'm talking about giving up on your spouse and giving in to releasing your steam by talking about him or her without their knowledge. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about not having communicated with your spouse. Letter O, do you look forward to sharing times together? And when you have these times, are they peaceful and enjoyable? Number one, is there a longing to be in the security of togetherness? There is a certain blessing of being able to walk in that door and close the door behind you and go, I'm safe. I'm safe. All those people out there are mean, but not in here. I've got my wife or I've got my husband. Oh, you can be quiet. And I'm fine now. I'm safe now. It ought to be that way where you look forward to going home. You look forward to being with your spouse and know that I'm good here. It's all good on the home front. Do you look forward to safety of mutual trust where you can, okay, let's just be honest, you can be yourself. You can relax. You can, now don't relax too much, okay? I know some men, they get a little too relaxed, okay? And that's not good. There's a certain amount of etiquette, gentlemen, that needs to be maintained in our marriages. We've been around some interesting fellows there in Kentucky that what they do to their wives should never be done to their wives. Anyhow, if you want to talk about it later on, I'll talk to you later on. Because they probably wouldn't care less. They'd think it's funny. But anyhow, I don't think it's funny. Letter P. Are there problems between you that remain unsolved because you don't have the bond of trust necessary to work together on a solution? Problems are still there, but you don't have the trust to work it through. Number one, it takes commitment to not walk away from the problem. Yes, it's emotionally draining. Yes, it is taxing of time and taxing of emotions and such. But don't walk away. Don't walk away. Keep there. Stay there. Number two, it takes compassion to work through the problem. It takes compassion to work through that problem. The more your spouse experiences this, the more they know they can trust you, and the more they know they can trust you, the more they will be willing to hang in with you and work together towards a solution to the problem in the moment. They know my spouse isn't going to walk away. My spouse is not going to dismiss this. My spouse is going to work through the solution. We're going to find an issue or find the solution to this problem, and we're not going to walk away from each other. We're going to work together through it. What's that do? It builds trust. They're not going to bow out of this one. They're going to battle with me, not against me. Letter Q. Are you comfortable with the vulnerability that a good marriage involves? You know, a lot of that has to do with some of our background. If you've been hurt in the past, there is probably some issues you're going to have to work through. And I would encourage you, work them through with your spouse. It's okay to say, I've been hurt. And I'm still hurting from blah, 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 blah experience. But the only way your marriage is going to be built and bettered is if you're working through those previous hurts together. It builds trust. You learn to trust each other. The degree to which you're comfortable with emotional, physical, and spiritual nakedness. People say I don't say that word right, so I had to say it right. My family mocks me. I want you to know that. I get harassed at home. In front of your spouse is a sure indicator of the quality of trust that exists between you. So it's very important that you are able to feel comfortable to be vulnerable in your marriage. Letter R. Do you ever wonder if you made a mistake in marrying the person who is your spouse? If you do, then that is an indication of lack of trust. Marital regret is a powerful indicator of the breakdown of the relationship, the breakdown of trust. In a person's mind, they're wondering, did I make the wrong decision? Because I don't feel close to this person. I don't feel like I can trust this person. And that is an obvious indication of a breakdown of trust. And so we need to look at our character. Is the character trust in our marriage? Letter S. Do you ever fear that you are being manipulated or taken advantage of in any way? If you do, then there is an issue of trust. Letter T. Do you ever wonder if your spouse cares for him or herself more than for you? If you can't place yourself into the hands of your spouse if you honestly feel your spouse cares more about themselves than they do you. You're not going to, because you are precious, you are valuable, you are vulnerable, and you're not going to place yourself into someone's hands that you don't trust is going to take care of you. And so, a lot of questions. I ran through this really quick. So the call to trust, the character of trust. Thirdly, the construction of trust. Do you have a relationship of total trust and rest in one another? Maybe you've taken trust for granted. Maybe you want your own way and you don't deal well with differences. Trust is readily given, easily broken, and it's costly to restore. And although trust is often temporarily given, it is something that always must be built, maintained, protected, restored when broken. We all do things that we don't even know that are damaging to trust. We don't think about it, we do it, but it's been damaging to our trust. Really, the early years of marriage are what I would call a trust internship. They really are a trust internship. What we're doing is we're watching each other. We're watching each other. We're taking cues from each other's responses to things. And all that is either diminishing a given trust or it is building that given trust. We're learning to the degree to which we can rely on one another and entrust ourselves to another. Can I say this? Can I do this? There's an internship of trust. It's given, but it's also on an intern basis of, okay, I gave it. Now, will you use it or abuse it? We all grant one another probationary trust, but this trust will not continue if it's violated. Over time, the comprehensive cohabitation of marriage will expose us, meaning the longer you live together, the more you realize, I married a sinner. What happened? It's just, listen, the longer you're together, the more you begin to see each other's faults. Now, and it can be the quirkiest things. How many of you squeeze a toothpaste from the middle? How many of you squeeze it from the end? Like a normal human being. Men, hopefully you put your dirty underwear and socks and stuff in the hamper and not on the floor. You do that? You're not married yet. You got time to work on that, okay? But there are things that over time you're just like, why do you do that? And you're learning from each other, and you've given trust, and you might drop a clue, and sometimes women, you might have to drop 5 or 10 clues to your husband, okay? Be gentle, but keep dropping them, all right? And if he doesn't get it, it's like what Jesus did when he was, when the disciples were talking about Lazarus, and finally he just got to the point, he's like, he's dead. Get the hint, Sometimes women, you might just have to give it straight, and here's how this works. So over time, that cohabitation of marriage will expose us. It will reveal our true heart and our character. We simply cannot have a relationship with someone whom we do not trust. Letter A. It takes straightforward words. If you're going to have the construction of trust, you need straightforward words. Okay? Matthew 5:37. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good, the use of edifying, that may minister grace unto the hearers. Now, straightforward, clear, and transparent communication that is without manipulation, deceit, or subtext is essential to building a relationship of trust. You've heard it this way. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Are you able to take each other's words at face value? Is it other-centered? Is it other-regarding? Edifying communication starts with the intention of the heart. Listen, when you ask your spouse a question, your spouse probably knows the answer you're looking for. Anything short of that answer is deceptive and it lacks trust. It's very important that you talk with each other and you discuss things together, and whatever is said, it is the total, absolute truth. Everything your spouse should know and ought to know and wants to know ought to be involved in that answer. There should be no subtext. Well, what I really meant, no, face value. If you said it this way, your spouse should be able to take you exactly as you said it. and there should be no reading between the lines. Okay? If your spouse has to read between the lines, your spouse will not be able to trust you. And they'll wonder every time that you speak whether or not you're telling them the absolute truth. You have to speak straightforward. Is your communication free of hidden agenda? And is it motivated by the needs of your spouse? You know what your spouse needs, and if you don't, ask. What do you need from me? What do you need to hear from me? What do you need me to say? Letter B, it takes staying true to your word. It takes staying true to your word. Wherefore, put away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Now, of course, it's speaking of a church body, but certainly could be applicable to us as spouses. Keep promises that you make. We cannot allow ourselves to minimize the importance of the little promises we make. Little moments make up our lifetime. You know, marriage for all these years, it didn't happen overnight. There was little moments that built up to that lifetime of marriage. So are you serious about your promises even when they are little? And do you do everything in your power to follow through on those? Letter C, it takes sincerely admitting your wrongs. Confess your faults one to another and pray for one another, James tells us. Self-righteousness and self-defensiveness do not encourage trust. Humble approachability does. Would you say that your spouse has an accurate view of themselves? If not, your spouse will lack any hope of you changing. If I don't have a proper view of myself, it's going to discourage my wife's ability to trust me because I'm self-deceived. If she does not have an accurate estimation of herself, I can't trust her because she can't even see the change that she needs to make. Your spouse needs to know you're not perfect and you're willing to work on it. They'll trust that. Hey, neither am I. You're admitting it. I'm admitting it. We're in the same boat. So you need to do this, though, admitting your wrongs. Do so quickly. Your spouse needs to drag it out of you. Admitting wrongs will not set well with your emotions, desires, and schedule of the moment. It will not go over well with yourself. So learn to do it and do it quickly. Eat the crow. It's better when it's warm. All right, number 2, daily. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Bad things happen when you give offenses time to marinate in your heart. We've all been there where offense happened. It may be your spouse, could be with anybody else. Offense happened. In your mind, you have rehearsed that thing. You know exactly what the other person was thinking. You know exactly every word they're going to say to you when they get to you. You've got all rehearsed in your brain. And so we then engage in conversation, and we've already made up our mind. Don't you look at me that way. You do it too. Why? Because we allowed it to marinate in our heart. It's soaked in, and now we're just blistering mad. So, you begin to rehearse privately or even openly the wrongs of your spouse, which in turn cause them to be defensive rather than open. Each of you then begins to wait on the other to make the first move towards confession or forgiveness. Well, I'll forgive her if she'll ask for it. Or I'll forgive him if he finally humbles himself and comes and grovels at my feet. What are we doing? We're waiting on each other, and the chances of either one of us having a humble enough spirit to come to each other is pretty slim. And so, wouldn't it be nice if we both made the first move at the same time? You first. No, you first. Same time. Can your spouse trust you to be willing to deal with your failures with honesty, humility, and commitment to change? Do you quickly admit your wrongs and seek forgiveness? Letter D. It takes seeking your spouse's welfare. We don't tend to entrust ourselves to someone who gives us the impression that he or she is too busy to care for us and little time to care for each other. So really it's a battle of kingdoms. We either concerned about our own kingdom or we're concerned about God's kingdom. Seeking the welfare of our spouse means stepping away from me-centric living and giving ourselves to other-focused living. So I ask you, how well do you do, or how well do you and your spouse take care of each other? Are you seeking the welfare of your spouse? If you seek their welfare, they know I can trust you because you care about me. You care about my welfare. Letter E. It takes seeing trust as an issue of warfare. As an issue of warfare. Number one, we're fighting against spiritual ghouls. I don't use that word very often, but someone I could find has to start with a G. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So you're not fighting your spouse in all reality. You're fighting spiritual wickedness in high places. You're not fighting the flesh and blood. The devil wants your marriage divided. He doesn't want you one. Because all you do is remind him of Christ and his bride. He don't like that. So he will fight you tooth and nail for you not to trust your spouse and your spouse not to trust you. This is a battle. It's better that the two of you fight that battle together than against each other. Fight the thing together. Number two, we're fighting against our selfish goals. I is always more attractive than we. Always more attractive. Number three, we're fighting for our spouse's good. And number four, we're fighting with our Savior's grace. Acknowledging the war produces within us a deep need for God's help. I can't do this. It causes us to reach out for his grace as well as extend it towards our spouse too. There's no better seedbed for trust than a sense of personal neediness. I need that, and your spouse needs that. So do you respond to your husband or wife out of a sense of your own heart needs? Finally, fourthly, the compounding of trust. How do you build it? Trust not only needs to be built, it needs protected. First, there must be, letter A, consistent and honest communication. We already kind of touched on that with some of our questions, but it's just so important. Sinners living in silence do not produce unity, understanding, or love. You got to talk to each other. Talk, and then talk some more. Now, most women do not have a problem with that. They have so many words they have to use per day. And it's funny because, you'd think, okay, I'm meddling for a moment, right? You'd think that by raising children at home, they'd have all their words used by the time dad got home. But no, they need to talk to an adult apparently too, because children just don't have the same intellectual capacity apparently than does an adult. And so there might be some words, husband, that you need to sit down and listen to when you get home. But, all right, I'm done meddling. However, it must be heart disclosing and relationship protecting. Okay? So this talk, and talk more, it's got to be heart disclosing. My heart talking to her heart talking to my heart. And it's got to be relationship protecting. That means this. There is a certain time to talk and to hash things out, and there's other times it's not a good time or a good place. I'll just be very frank with you. My wife knows if there's an issue to be brought up, do not bring it up to me before I preach. Don't bring it up to me before I preach. My mind is so focused and honed in on preaching the Word of God that I do not want to be distracted. So when I get home, she can unload. And then I'm like, why didn't you tell me sooner? You told me not to. You're right, I did. I shouldn't have said that, But I get myself in trouble sometimes, I didn't know you wanted to know the house was flooding. Not those kind of issues, okay? Or, you're out with friends and couples. That's not the right time to hash out a problem in front of everybody else. So there is a time and a place to talk and honestly communicate with one another. You need to learn her timing. There may be a time that she says, I'm open now. This is a good time for me to talk, communicate. And you need to know his timing. There are times where he's just a grouch. I'm speaking to myself, okay? He is a bear to deal with, and you know this is not a good time. I'm not bringing this up right now because I'll get nowhere with him. So there is a time when you know this is a good time to address the issue, and there's not a good time. Know the timing and know the place. Letter B. Committed and humble concentration. Committed and humble concentration. It is easy to slip into defensive mode. Instead, we need to listen, and listen more. Listening is an active commitment. We have to fight against preoccupation and preconceived conclusions. It means, yes, turn off the TV, turn off the stereo, put the phone down, whatever needs to happen so that your heart and your mind are focused on listening to your spouse. What does that tell your spouse? I can trust you. You're with me. You're committed to this relationship. You're committed to my thoughts and my feelings, and you're listening and you're concentrating. Beyond talking and listening, I would say we need to pray, and even pray some more with one another. And then conserving of trust. Finally, conserving of trust. Trust is a fine china of marriage, and so it is capable of shattering. Sometimes it's shattered by years of small moment neglect. At other times, it is shattered by a huge amount of unfaithfulness or betrayal. Turn your Bible to Jeremiah chapter number 18. Love this portion of Scripture. It gives me hope. It gives me such hope. Jeremiah 18, verse number 1. The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause you to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house. Behold, he wrought a work on the wheels, and the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he threw it away. Nope, so it says, does it? So he made it again, another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Hey, listen, there may be broken trust in your marriage, but it can be restored. It can be restored. Like a vessel that has been marred, it can be remade. It can be remade. Okay, so what do you do then when trust between you and your spouse has been broken? First of all, letter A, respond with confession. Respond with confession. Don't allow yourself to deny that the trust has been broken. The trust could have been broken on your spouse's part. Listen, don't deny your spouse broke your trust. Don't deny he or she broke your trust. Confess that. It's an issue of this is what happened. And then if you're the one that broke the trust, confess it. Confess it. However, don't allow yourself to give into discouragement or give up. You know, one spouse says, fine, I'm done. I give up. You can't be trusted. Or I blew it. I can't be trusted. I give up. You know, either way, it could go either direction. Honesty about what is broken is the first step to seeing it rebuilt. You got to be honest. This has been broken. And now let's find a way to rebuild it. Letter B, request counsel. Request counsel. If you're not able to trust one another enough to do what is necessary to work things out, you will need someone to hold you accountable for your commitment to change. If you and your spouse cannot work it out where you feel, the trust has been broken, but I think if we will do these things, then we can rebuild it. If you are not at that point, you're going to need to find counsel outside of your marriage in order to hold you accountable. But do it, otherwise the trust can never be rebuilt. Letter C, refuse to become cynical. Refuse to become cynical. It's very easy to tell yourself that there's no way out. When we begin to believe that the other person is unwilling to change, it becomes easy to fantasize about life on the outside of marriage, become reclusive, and even turn your home into a motel where two people live, but live without a meaningful relationship with one another. You just become cynical. He'll never change. She'll never change. I'm doomed to live this way the rest of my life. People live in marriages that have long since died. I've seen some. They have long since died. They're closed off in their feelings. They do not express them to their spouse. They live lonely lives while sharing the exact same address. I have family members that are like that, actually. I will not mention their names, but they live in the exact same building. I think the same building. I might even say the same room. It's just ugly, But they've been married for, I don't know, probably 40 some odd years, maybe even more than that, 45, maybe even 50 years. Same address, but dead marriage. Letter D, resolve to change. Resolve to change. Restoring trust means you have to be willing to take risks. Again, you cannot have a relationship without being vulnerable. Letter E, renew your commitment. The rebuilding of trust will not go perfectly. There will be moments of failure and disappointment along the way. You will wonder if you've made a mistake. And you have to consider renew the commitment. You need to go into rebuilding trust with realistic expectations. The trust between you is still new, if it's been broken, and it's still fragile. It's new, it's fragile, so you got to expect some possibilities of some disappointment. Get back up, address the failure with honesty and grace, and continue to do the good things you've been doing to try and restore what has been broken. And then finally, remember Christ. Remember Christ. You need to place your hope in Christ, not in your husband or wife. He, that is Christ, is with you. He is in you, and He is for you. There's always hope with Christ in you, Christ being with you, and Christ being for you. There's always hope. As the designer of marriage and the one who brought you together, He has a greater desire for the success of your marriage He created than you will ever have. He wants you to succeed. He wants you to succeed. He has the wisdom you need. He has the strength that you need. He offers the forgiveness that you need. He will not leave you when the going gets tough in your marriage. He's ready and able to give you the grace you need as you seek to put the shattered china of your trust back together again. And so trust is a very, very beautiful thing when it is the glue that holds a husband and wife together. And it is a sad thing when it is what keeps them apart. Trust will glue you together, or a broken trust will move you apart from each other. So where are you when it comes to trust? How is God calling you to get from where you are to where He can enable you to be? See, we always got to have His help. We cannot do this on our own. Don't be willing to live with shattered trust. If the trust in your marriage is shattered, or it's not what it could have been or should be, what it was at one time, and something's happened or some things have happened, be willing to work on it. God is always in the business of restoration. So whatever amount has been shattered or broken, He wants to restore it. He wants you close. He wants you intimate. He wants those things for your marriage. And both of you have to work diligently. And so I ask again, will you make that daily commitment to and with your spouse to have a sincere and honest, forthright trust inside your marriage? And whatever amount that might be there, might be where it would be, will you build on whatever is there and build up and up and up and up and up? And I hope some of these questions will help you to kind of, gauge, I guess you could say, the trust level in your marriage, and also give you some incentive then to either restore it or build it, whichever one needs to happen. But it needs to happen in our marriages. And so no other way to say that. Let's get with it. Let's just get with it and build that trust. Go through some of these things, maybe with your spouse, and just say, hey, listen, let's ask these questions to each other and let's find out, where's our trust levels here and what can we do to build, those trust levels back where they need to be and experience the blessing and the beauty of having two people who can freely offer themselves to one another and say, I trust you. I trust you with myself. And I'm glad that you're willing to trust me with yourself. What a beautiful marriage you can have with that glue of trust. All right. Let's pray together. Let's ask the Lord to help us to have that kind of trust in our marriages. Okay. Father, you are